Imagine in your mind a group of people who came up with a popular dance or a genre of music. Fortunately for us, in our modern day, we have examples of that. Blues, country, rock and roll, bluegrass, jazz, and even hip hop. So when it comes to dances, think about break dancing and how that type of dance is now considered global, even to the point where they're talking about making it into an Olympic activity. Why do I mention what I mentioned? Well, recently we had Beyonce. She came out with a country album and the response was kind of crazy. You had, I guess, radio stations that didn't want to play that music to begin with. Now they're playing it and it's moving up the country charts. But then that's funny because you had this guy from former Dukes of Hazzard actor. I think he was born and raised on Long Island, New York, moved to the ATL. But I mean, he's talking about some basically he's like, hey man, she don't belong in this genre. But this naturally takes me to an activity that is far older than country. It's far older than breakdancing, jazz and blues, bluegrass. This is something that's going back centuries right here, and it's called Moorish dancing or Moorish dance or Moorish dance. So post-production audio, shout out to the King's Monologue channel. I was doing some work on the Moorish dance due to my reading the Ancient and Modern Britons Volume 1. They had already mentioned it, but while perusing YouTube to get some footage and information on it, I found one of his videos. He did like a short video on it. I didn't even know that was him. But then recently he had a more thorough, detailed, deep dive into the Moorish dance right there. So, and I viewed that. I'm still working on mine, but hey, I'm definitely using some of this. But most of my information is coming from Ancient and Modern Britons and the sources contained in that book right there. So I must say, excellent work, my brother. Here's a little clip of a video that I want to play just to get your mind in tune with these things. Here we go.
Watching this part of English heritage, John, this is what you do.
Why is that part of their
Okay,
tradition?
well, back in the 1400s, which is where it's the earliest recorded events are, in the wintertime, the farm workers would disguise themselves to beg.
Right.
They couldn't get anything from the land. They had no other income apart from the wealth, the landowners that used to own the cottages. So during the winter, they would put rags on their jackets, maybe put bells on, disguise their faces, normally with soot from the chimney and some grease, and beg, go back home, take it all off. No one was any the wiser. And the next day they went back to work without any trouble.
Now, that is disputed because there are many different reasons for why the members of not necessarily your troop, but troops of Moorish dancers wear blackface. Do you understand that it does have upsetting racial connotations?
We don't think, personally, we don't think it does. It predates any racial connotations. It has no connection with the things that are being associated with it at the moment in terms of minstrelsy and whatever else. It way predates all that stuff. And it is purely a form of disguise.
Well, I would dispute that. I did a bit of research on my own after I sort of had this experience, and there seems to be a good deal of historical evidence later on from the period you're talking about, which links American minstrel shows and crude stereotypes brought over from the US during the Jim Crow era to English folk tradition.
Well, the minstrel shows were white performers in blackface in America from the 1830s to the 1950s, and that was disparaging.
Yeah, definitely. And I also read there's historical literature in the UK that confirms that an alternative name for Border Morris in the early 20th century was actually N-word dancing, which I think really shows the historic link there.
The video was very interesting. I appreciate that. Now, they claim, or rather the guy claimed that it was in the time period of the 1400s where the earliest recorded instance of this dance took place in history. So, I mean, we're gonna put that to the test. And he also claimed that farm workers, they used either soot or black grease to disguise themselves in order to beg before they return to work, so they won't have any issues when they return to work. And he said that the blackface worn in this dance has no connection to the minstrels. Now, they are half right and half wrong. Why do I say half right and half wrong? Because, well, the blackface worn, it did have connections to minstrels. The only problem is you have to differentiate which minstrel you're talking about and definitely which time period you're referring to, because well, I'm gonna put the definition up later on in this video, but let's go ahead and just get an idea of what Moorish dancing actually is before I proceed. Now, we're going to look at a clip where the dancers have donned themselves with a black face or a painted face. So here we go. No doubt you guys found that interesting. I know that I did, watching the barefaced Moorish dance followed by the Moorish dance in full blackface. Now, on to the facts, and feelings may get hurt. Disclaimer, feelings may get hurt. So we're gonna go and uncover these true facts through Ancient and Modern Britons Volume 1 by David McRitchie. Let's get it started. 53 and 54 reads, "It has been seen that one of the modern forms of this word is Moray or Murray. Another form is Morris, existing now as a surname and remembered as associated with the Moorish dance, common enough in this country during the Middle Ages and still practiced, I believe, by English country folk. Its origin is ascribed to the Moors, though the genuine Moorish dance, the fandango, of the present day bears little resemblance to it. The chief performer was the hobby horse, so called from the light frame of wicker work which was fastened round his body and supplied with a pasteboard head and neck so as to give him the appearance of a man on horseback. Bells were also attached to his ankles, and the great art consisted in so moving the feet as to produce a rude kind of concord. The other principal actors, after a rude fashion, personified the characters of Maid Marian, the Queen of the May, Robin Hood, Friar Tuck, the Fool, etc. and the performance was accompanied by rude music and the clashing of swords and staves, and was the chief amusement at parochial festivals. In its original form, it appears also to have been danced with wild leaps and bounds, more in keeping with the orgies round the earliest maypoles than with the innocent revels of modern English rustics. This dance, then, which bears little resemblance to that of the mixed nation now called Moors, is one of the ancient dances of this country. Sir Walter Scott has this to say regarding it: considerable diversity of opinion exists respecting the introduction of the Moorish dance into Britain. The name points it out as of Moorish origin, and so popular as this leaping kind of dancing for many centuries been in this country, that when Handel was asked to point out the peculiar taste in dancing and music of the several nations of Europe, to the French he ascribed the minuet, to the Spaniard the saraband, to the Italian the arietta, to the English the hornpipe or Moorish dance, so that it was actually regarded as the national dance of our country. England has never been invaded from Morocco during historic times, nor even in this dance the property of the people of Morocco. It is peculiarly British, and yet of Moorish origin? Yes, but the date of the introduction into Britain by the Moors was the date of the landing of the Pictish people, whensoever that may have been. Our language still retains the memory of their presence under this name. In Shakespeare's time, the audience at the Globe accepted the word as meaning a black man, and either then or later on, it became tautologically extended into blackamoor. The common people of the country are not likely to have known much about ultra-British Moors, not enough at any rate to have made the word an everyday term for a black man. Nor can the Moors of heraldry be explained sufficiently by the theory that the founders of the families bearing Moors as supporters and Moors' heads as crests had worn the spurs in assisting the Spaniards to expel their Moors. There's a lot of good information that just jumps out to you. On page 53, you get the profile of this entire dance. You see the key features of the dance: the rude music, the bells around the ankles, the sticks that symbolize the swords, they're clashing together with the person in front of you. And then, I mentioned the rude music, also the pagan origin of this entire dance. On page 54, George Frederick Handel, he took it upon himself to claim that the dance is totally British. That was a lie. I don't know why he did that. It's almost like calling Georgia the peach state when, Jersey, South Carolina, and I think Ohio too, and Cali, they all produce peaches at a greater clip, but Georgia was deemed to be the peach state. In all actuality, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Europe, all across Europe, that Moorish dance was a real thing, and it was associated with those people just as much as Handel wanted to portray it being a British dance. It was a dance all across Europe. Now, staying on page 54, let's speak about the distinction that's made between the Moors. What Moors are we talking about? So on 54, check out, it says, England has never been invaded from Morocco during historic times, nor even is this dance the property of the people of Morocco. It is particularly or peculiarly British, and yet of Moorish origin. So here's the answer right here. Okay, but the date of its introduction into Britain by the Moors was the date of the landing of the Pictish people, whensoever they may have been. Okay, and then it tells you right here. Basically, it tells you what a Moor is. In Shakespeare's time, the audience at the Globe accepted the word to mean a black man, and either then it became blackamoor. So these Moors right here, it was a term for black people, black men, black man. Really, they're not really black like that, but that's what other races saw when they came over. So, okay, and I like this one right here. This is very important right here. It says, nor can the Moors of heraldry be explained sufficiently by the theory that the founders of families bearing Moors as supporters and Moors' heads as crests had won their spurs in assisting the Spaniards to expel their Moors. Now check it out, their Moors. So basically, the white folks that were in Spain and then the white folks that were in the UK, this is how they viewed the people that was already there. They colorized them in terms of color. So basically, we know that Moors came from, was it Mari, the Greek Maros, Greek. Then the Latins adopted it and kind of came up with their own version. So the Moors of the UK or the British Isles were these Pictish people right there. No way around it. Pages 136 through 139 reads, a tradition of a black man living in Scotland within the memory of man was noticed in treating of the Moors, who are in all probability of the same race, substantially as the other black Europeans, under whatever name. A counterpart to the black Moro of Galloway is to be seen in a traditional black knight who is said to have lived near Ashton-under-Lyne, holding the people in vassalage and using them with great severity. This legendary blackamoor must antedate the Galloway ruffian. The critics had been objecting to the complexion of the slaves of Brian de Bois-Guilbert as being totally out of costume and propriety. This objection he meets by citing an instance in romance, which shows that not only were there black people in England during the Dark Ages, dark in a double sense, but also that they constituted, or at least formed, a recognized part of the class of wandering minstrels and mountebanks. The case in point is this: John of Rapine, an excellent juggler and minstrel, undertook to effect the escape of Adolphe de Bracy by presenting himself in disguise at the court of the king where he was confined. For this purpose, he stained his hair and his whole body entirely black as jet, so that nothing was white but his teeth, and succeeded in imposing himself on the king as an Ethiopian minstrel. He effected by stratagem the escape of the prisoner. Negroes, therefore, must have been known in England in the Dark Ages. Pages 138 through 139 reads, now, this instance in romance or history not only fully corroborates what has already been said with regard to the presence of black people, but it also agrees with several other word witnesses. For example, the Gaelic dub, that's either focal or shocal, or a black word, which means a bad expression, has other varieties of meaning. It signifies as well a dark saying, a riddle, or a puzzle, a parable. And Douglas is a feat in legerdemain or in black art, and magic or necromancy is black art, all of which things are connected with strolling jugglers and charlatans. To the same people must belong a dance once known as Black Almain, which is perhaps nothing else than the Moorish Dance. Drop down farther, the savage and the Galloway gypsy and the Irish rebels described by Derrick are all Cutocks, or men with plaited hair, and the two last are known as men of swarthy skin, which may be predicated of the first as well, since Cutock gypsy. In short, the three names described one people, and this swarthy nomadic race is possessed of precisely the same characteristics as the black-skinned jugglers and minstrels, who formed part of the substratum of the English nation in the Dark Ages. If there be any truth whatever in the adventure of John of Rampayne, it becomes therefore of importance to discover what is known as to the date of the arrival of the gypsies in Europe, and to glance as hurriedly as may with advantage be done at their most striking features. Page 136 of the book, Ancient and Modern Britons, really drops a huge bombshell that will hurt a lot of feelings, but who cares about that? We're seeking truth over here. So check this out. It's saying a tradition of a black man living in Scotland within the memory of man. So notice, in treating of the Moors, who are in all probability of the same race substantially as the other black Europeans under whatever name. So this is acknowledging something right there. All across Europe, the British Isles, we already mentioned the Pictish people being the Moors of the UK, not the Arab or Muslim Moors that the Spanish or the Iberians were dealing with, but these are Moors across Europe. In the book Origin of the Anglo-Saxon Race, it talks about the ancient brown Alpine race, or the ancient Alpine race. So that's acknowledged. That's something that you have to link together. Another acknowledgement that seems to have been written out of history is found on page 137. It's referring to the Ethiopian minstrels, and we have to clear some things up, because minstrel is basically a medieval singer or musician who is just singing or reciting lyrics or poetry to music for nobility. And then you have the second, more well-known version of minstrel, and that's the that's the one that's white guys in blackface basically mocking the original people. And we're not talking about that when we're speaking of the singers or musicians who are just doing their thing. They can be in comedy, just something accompanied by music. So the Ethiopian minstrels on page 137. One thing that I must say is that the writer of this book, David McRitchie, he has some great foresight. Thank the Most High on this, because listen, he just kills any notion of explaining away things. Look at what he says on page 137. He says, speaking of the critics who's objecting that the complexion of these minstrel members are part of costume and propriety. Now, I like when he says that, this shows basically when people paint themselves that way, they're imitating something that they're seeing or people that they are seeing. So this exposes the fact that in the Dark Ages that there were black people or original people, melanated people in England during those times. And the wandering minstrels and mountebanks. We have the example of John of Rampayne, and basically this is a white guy who painted himself to try to pass as an Ethiopian minstrel member. So 147 or 137, it mentions down below right here, Negroes therefore must have been known in England in the Dark Ages. Known and around. So let's go to page 138. Looking at page 138, the top portion, we see that David McRitchie actually acknowledges that during that time, the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, there was a presence of black people. And that's evident by the word witnesses like Doug, was that Folklore, Black Word. We're gonna get on that later, but I wanted to center this around the custom of Moorish dancing. But when you scroll down a little bit, it says that these strolling jugglers and charlatans. These people, they belong to a dance once known as Black Almain, which is Hallowell. I know I'm butchering that, but he says which is perhaps nothing else than the Moorish dance. So scroll down a little bit on page 138, and these gypsies right here, or Irish rebels, which are Qtaks or Qwaks, men with plaited hair and swarthy skin, going back to those Pictish people there. Pictish people, Danes, Egyptians, so on and so forth. Different Huns that came in. Yes, Huns. So it says that they're swarthy, they're nomadic, they have the same characteristics as the black-skinned jugglers and minstrels, who formed part of the substratum or foundation of the English nation in the Dark Ages. There we go. That's what you need right there. That sticks out like a sore thumb. Page 176 reads, one other example may be taken here. Scott tells us that the Moorish dance was regarded by Handel as the distinguishing dance of Britain. This dance, as the modern jig or hornpipe, is a greatly modified version of the dance of the ancient Moorish or Moorish men. But we have a glimpse of it in something like its original aspect in the picture drawn by the Scotch historian of the Gypsies. Now, page 176, that's basically something that we already spoke on. It's George Frederick Handel. He's tacking on or associating Moorish dancing with something that's particularly British, when in reality Ireland was doing that dance heavy, Scotland, Wales, as well as the Danes. They had their own version all over Europe. They had the Germans gypsies coming over, the French gypsies or Pictish people coming over. They already had it. So I mean, this was unconnected from the Arabic Moors that we tend to associate that title Moor with. These were Pictish people, dark-skinned people. Those were the Picts, and also the Danes too. But yeah, so what is 176 talking about? Okay, so Scott tells us that the Moorish dance, this dance, as the modern jig or hornpipe, is a greatly modified version of the dance of the ancient Moorish or Moorish men. Pages 351 and 352, starting at the bottom portion of 351, reads, the crossbow has been laid aside long ago, and the Moorish dance, unless in very modified forms, is no longer danced, which is not to be regretted if it resembled the Maenad reel that Mr. Simpson pictures. But this blackamoor's dance and the use of the crossbow are two of our most ancient usages, the former having been regarded by continental people of last century as peculiarly British. Let's look at the footnote. It reads, the term was given by white people to one dance at least, but the name is one of a general nature, and the Moors themselves had probably a great variety of dances. What was afterwards remembered as Kemp's Moorish seems to have differed somewhat from the commonest kind of Moorish dance. This man himself, no doubt a gypsy, is said to have danced a Moorish from London to Norwich in 9 days, of which he printed the account AD 1600, entitled Kemp's 9 Days Wonder, referred to by Gross. Pages 351 and 352, we're getting into heavy territory there. So basically, the non-footnote portions of 351 and 352, the continuation of that, is basically telling us that the crossbow and the Moorish dance, those are what they call the Blackamoors dance. So they're really regarded by people of continental Europe as something that's being particularly British. So you can thank George Frederick Handel for trumpeting that, even though Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and the rest of the continental Europe was doing the Moorish dance already. He even had his own name. We will definitely discuss that in this very video presentation we're doing. Now, let's go ahead and look at the footnote, and let's see, the term was given, what term? Blackamoors dance. Okay, so the Blackamoors dance was given by white people to one dance at least. Also, keep in mind that the Moors had a variety of dances. They didn't just have one specific dance. They had many. Pages 396 through 398 reads, the Moorish dance of Ireland, which under the name of Rinky or Rinka Fada, the long dance, is described by Walker in his Memoirs of the Irish Bards, was plainly a minstrel's dance, and clearly it was substantially the Moors dance that was once common to Western Europe. Now, although it eventually came to be danced by men of white complexion, this dance, as already pointed out, was originally the dance of the blacks. In a short description of the uncorrupted Moorish dance as practiced in France about the beginning of the 16th century, it is stated that about that period, it was the custom in good societies for a boy to come into the hall when supper was finished, with his face blackened, his forehead bound with white or yellow taffeta, and bells tied to his legs. He then proceeded to dance the Morisco the whole length of the hall, backwards and forwards, to the great amusement of the company. There are other French examples of Moorish dancing of earlier date than that, one so early as 1440 and another of 1458, on which latter occasion the dancers were attired like savages. We are told that in Spain, the Moorish dancers usually blackened their faces with soot that they might the better pass for Moors. During the early part of the 16th century, it was the common custom for the citizens of Edinburgh to conclude an evening's amusement by bringing in the Moors or Moorish, and it is on record that at that period, the Egyptians danced before the king at Holyrood House on at least one occasion. Whatever, therefore, may have been the natural complexion of those dancers and minstrels who are stated by Walker to have welcomed James II with the Rinka Fada when he landed at Kensdale 2 centuries ago. It seems most probable that their faces were at least temporarily blackened. If not Moors by descent, they were probably Moors in appearance, like all the earlier dances of the Moors dance. It does not appear that this fashion of blackening the face in memory of the complexion of the earliest jongleurs is really extinct in modern England. Mr. C.G. Leyland, at page 114 of his English Gypsies, remarks as follows: Naubat, in the language of the Hindu knots, signifies time, turn, and instruments of music sounding at the gate of a great man at certain intervals. Nobet, which is a gypsy word well known to all itinerant Negro minstrels, means to go about with music to get money. To nobet around the term washerin, it also implies time or turn, as I inferred from what I was told on inquiry. You can shun dovo at the Welguras when yek is the waiver, you jal and nobat. You can hear that at the fairs when one says to the other, you go and nobat, meaning it is your turn to play now. When Mr. Leyland speaks of the itinerant Negro minstrels, it is evident he means the kind that one sees at Epsom or Brighton. And these, of course, are not real Negroes. The important point is that he ascribes to such men a knowledge of the gypsy language, and indeed he almost identifies them with the gypsies, although it is likely they have only a suspicion of gypsiness in them. Thus, it would seem that those itinerant Negro minstrels are not at all a result of the modern Christie minstrel movement, although they may have adopted some of its peculiarities. It seems impossible to point to a time when there have not been itinerant Negro minstrels in England, though their color may have become more and more artificial in nature as time has gone on. Pages 396 through 398, we see that the Moorish dance of Ireland, not Britain, but of Ireland, is actually the Rinke Fada, or the Rinke as they call it, which is nothing more than a long dance. And definitely Memoirs of the Irish Bards, they talk about this, and it's basically a minstrel's dance. So Moorish dance, aka Rinke, aka Rinke Fada, aka minstrel's dance. Associate all that together. So the minstrel's dance and the Moorish dance is connected to who in Ireland? The Pictish Moors. All right. So let's look at what else do we have. And I quote, "Now, although it eventually came to be danced by men of white complexion, this dance was originally the dance of the blacks. This fact really explains the blackface that is used and associated with this dance now." Okay, now this is the scenario. White people, they took a liking to it, just like with jazz, country, bluegrass, R&B, and currently hip-hop, breakdancing. These folks, they took a liking to it. They imitated what they thought were, I guess, was gonna make them down with the original people. Okay, hey, look, we're just like you. So they painted their face instead of like Eminem, instead of using a sling. Now he wanted the exterior to imitate the original folks instead of vocabulary, if that makes any sense. Now, I know people gonna be offended by that. They're gonna be like, "Oh man, but you're hating on our people, you prejudice and blah blah. You just want to be, black supremacists and all that." But nah, let's look at 397, and I quote, "We are told that in Spain, the Moorish dancers usually blacken their faces with soot that they might the better pass for Moors. During the early part of the 16th century, it was the common custom for the citizens of Edinburgh to conclude an evening's amusement by bringing in the Moors or Moorish." The timeline between this is 1440 to 1599. That's when white folks start blacking their face because they are imitating or to appear as the Pictish Moor, the Danish Moor, the Egyptian Moor, the Hun Moor, so on and so forth. And keep in mind that on page 396, it is acknowledgement that this Moorish dance or Rinke Fada was common to Western Europe. All right. So back to page 397, going into 398. Let's drop down right here. So jongleurs. All right. Jongleurs, jugglers, minstrels. So that's where the blackening of the face came from. It says, "In memory of the complexion of the earliest jongleurs, jugglers, minstrels." So then he started going into the black speech. I'm going to do something on that later on. Another key characteristic of the Moorish people of Europe, unconnected from the Arab Moors that came later, or these are the Maori that we're speaking of. All right, so they have their own speech. I'm not even going to get into that part. So Mr. Leyland, he's speaking of the itinerant Negro minstrels. All right. So the guys that think I'm trying to be a culture vulture and appropriate culture. Okay, this book has so much acknowledgement of what we're seeing here. So itinerant Negro minstrels, Moors, all of that stuff. So nobody can say that. This is our thing. So, okay. So when he said that these are not real Negroes, he's talking about, all right, the originals, those were Negroes. The people that painted their face, those are not Negroes. So, what else? Okay, the gypsies right there. So now, let's check out the historical memoirs of the Irish bards. The book is by Joseph C. Walker, and we're going to read everything in the yellow highlights. Every nation, like Ireland, whose inhabitants are strictly natives, has a dance as well as a song peculiar to itself. These are so closely connected that the history of the one seems naturally to involve that of the other. It must therefore appear extraordinary that in the course of a work which professes to treat of the music of Ireland, no notice has been taken of the Irish dance. But the almost total silence of the Irish historians on this head occasioned ours. Here, indeed, tradition steps in with a description of the Rinca Fada, which she affirms was the dance of the ancient Irish. When that unfortunate Prince James II landed at Kinsdale, his friends who waited his arrival on the seashore received him with the Rinca Fada, the figure and execution of which delighted him exceedingly. This was the figure: 3 persons abreast, each holding the ends of a white handkerchief. First moved forward a few paces to slow music. The rest of the dancers followed, 2 and 2, a white handkerchief between each. Then the dance began, the music suddenly changing to brisk time. The dancers passed with a quick step under the handkerchiefs of the 3 in front, wheeled round in semicircles, formed a variety of pleasing, animating evolutions, interspersed at intervals with entree chants or cuts, united and fell again into their original places behind and paused. This was probably the dance of the pagan Irish during their festivals on the 1st of May and the 1st of August, when fires were lighted and sacrifices offered on the most lofty eminences in every part of the kingdom to Baal or the sun. Nor is it unlikely that the dancers were a kind of chorus, sung as they danced, and hymn in praise of the deity whom they were honoring. Perhaps the classical reader will find, and we think he may, a similarity between our Rinca Fada and the festal dance of the Greeks. We will pursue the subject a little farther, Mr. O'Connor having slightly mentioned in his admirable dissertations on the history of Ireland a dance in which the ancient Irish exercised themselves in the void spaces of their forests during their hunting matches. I applied to him for some particulars respecting this dance and was kindly favored with the following. Their rinky or field dance was generally performed in circles. Great agility as well as great skill was required of the performers, whether they broke or closed the circle. The action was governed by music. Each evolution had its stated time till a new change in their allegro called for a change of action, and so on till a reiteration of the dancing port, as they termed it, relieved the dancer, and in their turn called out different actors. This dance seems to have been of the nature of the armed dance, which is so ancient and with which the Grecian youth amused themselves during the siege of Troy. The rinky was certainly an emblem of war, for in the infancy of society, dancing is an imitative art. And as the Irish were anciently so warlike a people, it is natural to suppose that they imitated military evolutions in their sports to indulge their passions for arms. As well as a rinky or martial dance, the Irish no doubt had a sacred dance which was performed by their priests, for in all the ancient religions, the priests were dancers by profession. In fact, we find that our druids observed the revolutions of the year, festivals, etc., by dancing around our round towers. Here I want to provide some video where I compare and contrast the British Moorish dance with the Irish Rinka Fada, and let me know if you see some similarities there, because I'm under the impression, actually I have proof and evidence that both of these are two different types of Moorish dance.
Up, hop back, up, 1, 2, 3, 4. Left foot, right hand in, into place, and now the left foot. Very nice. Left hand, and advance down centre, leading our odd couples through the centre, turning, dance around, gentle around the gentle, around the lady. Other couples move forward, and we all dance into the new places, full circle around. And the dance starts all over again. Very nice. Up, hop back. Right hand in. Left foot. Left hand. And down the centre. Odd couple through the centre, turning, inside hands, dance around, gentle on the gent lady around the lady, move forward and 2 hands. Dancing around. And we start again. Up, hop back, up, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right hand in. Again. And left hand in. And Rinka Fada. It's a simple dance, very nice, enjoyable dance. Turning in. That's around, step forward. And 2 hands. Very nice.
Now, you guys saw the Rinka Fada live and in action, so now you have a visual to go along with the description that I read. Now, here I'm going to read this page here. I hope you guys can see it clearly, but it starts and it says, "The feudal system which had prevailed from time immemorial in Ireland received a severe stroke from Elizabeth, which was repeated by Cromwell and fatally reiterated by William III. The pride of the chieftains was humbled, and many of their castles razed. Some of those unfortunate men fled to the continent. Others patiently waited to receive the English yoke. In their halls, which formerly resounded with the voice of minstrelsy and song, and glittered with barbarous magnificence, there reigned The next page reads, "They were no longer entertained in the families of the great, nor treated with wonted respect. They degenerated into itinerant musicians, wandering from house to house, their harp slung at their back, soliciting admission and offering to pay for hire. Sometimes they were to be found exciting and sprightly dance at a patron, sometimes raising the solemn dirge at the country wake. The last of this order of men, whose name deserves to be recorded, was Turlo Carolan, a fine natural genius who died in the year 1738. Now, the point of my reading that was to show you how that kind of fell from grace right there, depending on who was in rulership. Now, also, the whole video is to show you that, okay, when you hear Moorish dance, that's really a variant of Moorish dance, and those are the original Pictish people, these Egyptians, these gypsies, these Danes, these just the regular brown and dark brown people, the originals of Europe, and more specifically the UK, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Britain. So the reason they paint their face is because, well, the people that came in, you know, the paler people, the white people that came in, they were imitating the original people whom they saw performing those dances. So also link up Moorish people with the minstrels, the original minstrels right there. So again, this may hurt feelings because people will take it personal because they associate one group of people with something negative and then they associate another group of people with something positive only. So they, you know, the worldviews will be shaken, but can't say that you're not educated. That's the end of this video, guys. See you later. Part 2 will come later.